Welcome to Astrid's Tales. Here's today's story. My husband David held me while I cried over yet another negative pregnancy test, whispering that it was okay that we were enough, just the two of us. For 3 years, he played the role of the grieving, infertile partner to perfection. He came to every fertility appointment, held my hand during every invasive ultrasound, and even pretended to take the vitamins our specialist prescribed. He watched me sink into a deep depression, watched me blame my own body for our failure, and never once blinked. But this morning, everything changed. I sat on the bathroom floor staring at 2 bright pink lines, a miracle I thought was physically impossible. I was ready to scream with joy, to run into the bedroom and wake him with the news that would change our lives. But then, I found a small crumpled receipt at the bottom of his gym bag from a clinic across the state line. It wasn't for fertility treatments. It was for a follow-up all-clear sperm count test post-procedure. David didn't just have a low count. He had a secret vasectomy 5 years ago, before we even met. He didn't just lie. He watched me break myself apart trying to fix a problem he knew didn't exist. Now I'm sitting at the kitchen table, the positive test hidden in my pocket, watching him pour his coffee and ask me why I look so happy. He thinks he's safe. He thinks I'm still the broken wife. He has no idea that his miracle is actually his undoing. Am I the asshole for how I'm about to blow up his life? To understand the magnitude of David's deception, one must first examine the architecture of our relationship. We met in our late 20s, a time when the frantic energy of youth begins to settle into the structured ambition of adulthood. From our very first date at a quiet Italian bistro, we seemed destined for one another. We shared the same values regarding fiscal responsibility, the same drive for professional success, and, crucially, the same vision for a family. On our 3rd date, over a bottle of Chianti, David looked me in the eye and told me he wanted 4 kids. He spoke about fatherhood not as a distant obligation, but as a central pillar of his life's purpose. He described coaching Little League, building tree houses, and the chaotic joy of a full Christmas table. I fell for him instantly. I had spent my life dreaming of motherhood, and finding a partner who mirrored that desire felt less like romance and more like destiny. Our wedding was a celebration of this shared future. During his vows, David promised to build a home filled with laughter and the pitter-patter of little feet. The guests wiped away tears. I simply squeezed his hands, believing I had won the lottery. We didn't wait to start our family. We began trying on our honeymoon in St. Lucia. Months turned into a year. The excitement of possibility began to curdle into anxiety. I tracked my cycle with military precision. I bought ovulation kits in bulk. David remained the rock, the steady hand on my trembling shoulder. "It takes time, honey," he would say, smoothing my hair. "We're just under a lot of stress." Nature has its own timeline. When the 2nd year arrived without a pregnancy, the worry transformed into a quiet, gnawing panic. The bedroom, once a place of intimacy, became a clinical environment. Governed by calendars and temperatures, we eventually sought the help of a renowned fertility specialist. This period marks the beginning of the true cruelty of David's plan. The doctor, a serious woman with kind eyes, ran a battery of tests on both of us. My results came back slightly suboptimal, a vague term indicating slightly lower ovarian reserve than average for my age. But nothing that should have precluded a natural pregnancy. David's results, however, were catastrophic. The analysis showed severely low motility and an almost non-existent sperm count. I remember the moment vividly. David sat in the plush leather chair of the doctor's office, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. He looked like a man defeated. "I feel like I'm failing you," he whispered to me later in the car. "I feel like less of a man." I spent the next 6 months dedicating my life to fixing him. I researched every supplement, every diet, and every holistic treatment available for male infertility. I cooked him specific meals rich in zinc and antioxidants. I bought expensive vitamins that cost a fortune. And he took them. Every morning, with a performance worthy of an Academy Award, he would swallow the pills I laid out for him, knowing full well they were doing absolutely nothing because his plumbing had been professionally disconnected years prior. The psychological toll was immense. I began to internalize the failure. Despite the diagnosis being technically his, the burden of the cure fell on me. I underwent invasive procedures to ensure my own reproductive health was pristine. I took Clomid. I endured HSG tests where dye was pushed through my fallopian tubes, a procedure that caused me excruciating pain while David held my hand and looked sympathetically into my eyes. I started to feel like a failure as a woman. Our home felt less like a sanctuary and more like a tomb for potential life. I would see a mother pushing a stroller in the park and have to retreat to my car to weep. David used his infertility as a shield. Whenever I expressed frustration or sadness, he would pivot the conversation to his own brokenness, forcing me to suppress my grief to comfort him. It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. The miracle occurred in October. We had gone on a weekend trip to a remote cabin to reconnect, a suggestion from our therapist to escape the relentless stress of fertility schedules. Ironically, we had stopped trying in the clinical sense. The doctor had suggested in vitro fertilization, IVF, was our only remaining hope. And we were currently saving up the $20,000 required for the first round. 2 weeks later, I felt the first wave of nausea. I dismissed it as food poisoning or a stomach bug. When my period was a day late, I ignored it. I had been down that road 100 times, and hope was a dangerous thing. But on the third day, compelled by an instinct I couldn't name, I bought a digital test. I took it in the downstairs bathroom while David was at the gym. I set it on the sink and refused to look for 3 minutes. When I finally turned it over, the words stared back at me in stark black letters, "Call on pregnant." I fell to my knees on the cold tile. I laughed until I choked. Tears streamed down my face. I thought of every prayer I had whispered into the dark. I thought David would be the happiest man on earth. We were the statistical anomaly, the 1% chance the doctors talked about in hushed tones. I wanted to surprise him. I went to the hall closet to find a gift bag to hide the test in. As I rummaged through the clutter on the floor, I knocked over his old gym bag. It fell open, spilling its contents: a towel, a water bottle, and a small, crumpled blue slip of paper. It was a receipt. I picked it up, intending to throw it away. Then I saw the logo. It wasn't from our fertility clinic. It was a billing statement from the Men's Health and Urology Center, located 3 hours away across state lines. The date on the receipt was from 3 months ago. The charge was for a post-procedural analysis. I froze. Why would David be at a urology clinic 3 hours away? Why would he need a post-procedural analysis? I called the number on the receipt. I deepened my voice, adopting a professional tone. "Hello, I'm calling from Mr. Henderson's insurance provider. We have a query regarding the service date for his last visit. We need to confirm the nature of the procedure code for billing." The receptionist paused, typing. "Oh, Mr. Henderson? Yes, he was in for his 5-year post-vasectomy checkup. The sperm count confirmation. Everything is still confirmed at 0. The phone slipped from my hand. The world didn't just stop. It inverted. The gravity of the situation hit me with physical force. If he had a confirmed 0 count 3 months ago and I was pregnant today, logic dictated 2 possibilities. Either I had cheated, which was impossible, or the permanent procedure had failed. This phenomenon, known as recanalization, is rare but medically documented. But the medical anomaly was secondary to the betrayal. The receptionist's words echoed in my mind. 5-year post-vasectomy checkup. 5 years. He had the procedure before we even met. He had entered our marriage with a lie of monumental proportions. He had watched me spend thousands of dollars on specialists. He had watched me cry myself to sleep. He had watched me blame my own body. He had let me believe we were struggling together against nature, when, in reality, he was an observer at my funeral. He didn't just lie. He orchestrated a tragedy. I didn't confront him when he came home from the gym. I needed more evidence. I needed to understand the why. While he was in the shower, I logged onto his laptop. I guessed his password. It was the name of his first dog. I navigated to a hidden folder deep within his archived emails. There, I found a chain of emails between David and his brother, dating back to 3 months before our wedding. One email stood out like a beacon of malice. "Sarah is great, but I'm done with kids. My ex-wife put me through the ringer with child support, and I'm never doing that again. I got the snip last week. Sarah wants the whole white picket fence thing, so I'll just tell her we're trying. If it doesn't happen, it's nature's fault. She never know. It's cleaner this way." I sat back in the chair, reading the words over and over. It's cleaner this way. He viewed my heartbreak as a clean solution to his desire to avoid responsibility. He had denied me the one thing I told him was non-negotiable, and he had done it by gaslighting me for half a decade. The initial shock gave way to a cold, hard rage. I decided that a simple divorce wasn't enough. He wanted to avoid child support and responsibility? He wanted to control the narrative? Fine. I would give him a narrative he couldn't control. I invited both of our parents over for a big announcement dinner that coming Sunday. David was glowing when I told him to set the table. He assumed I was going to announce that we had finally saved enough for the IVF treatment. He spent the afternoon humming, opening a bottle of expensive wine, playing the role of the supportive husband to the hilt. When everyone was seated, my parents beaming with anticipation, his parents looking politely curious, David raised his glass. "To family," he said, "and to new beginnings." "I do have an announcement," I said, standing up. My hands were steady. I reached under the table and pulled out a stack of manila envelopes. I handed one to my mother, one to my father, one to his parents, and finally one to David. "We're having a baby," I said. The reaction was immediate. My mother screamed with joy, clapping her hands over her mouth. David's father stood up and clapped him on the back, shaking his hand vigorously. David, however, turned the color of ash. He stared at me, his glass frozen halfway to his mouth. His eyes were wide with a mixture of terror and accusation. In his mind, there was only one explanation. He thought I had cheated. He thought he had caught me. "Sarah," he stammered, his voice trembling. "How?" The doctor said. "I mean, my count." "It's impossible." "Oh, it's a miracle, David," I said, my voice dripping with a sweetness that barely masked the venom beneath. "Especially considering your 5-year post-vasectomy checkup results I found in your gym bag. Everyone, please look at page 2 in your envelopes." The room went silent. The rustling of paper was the only sound. Page 2 was a photocopy of the receipt from the urology clinic. Page 3 was a printout of the email to his brother. My father stood up slowly, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. David's mother looked at the email, then at her son, and whispered, "David, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't do this to her." David looked around the table, trapped. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. "I'm pregnant, David," I continued, leaning over the table. "And the doctors tell me that sometimes, very rarely, a vasectomy can spontaneously reverse. It's a 1 in a million chance. Nature found a way." I paused, letting the reality sink in. "So, congratulations. You're going to be a father. The very thing you lied for 5 years to avoid. And since you were so worried about child support in your email, you should know that I've already filed for divorce. I'll be taking the house. I'll be taking the savings we built together for the IVF you knew we'd never need. And yes, you'll be paying every cent of child support for the next 18 years. The dinner ended in chaos. David tried to argue, tried to sputter that I must have cheated, that the baby couldn't be his. I calmly handed him the results of the non-invasive prenatal paternity test I'd rushed through a private lab earlier that week. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. Nature had played the ultimate prank on a man who tried to cheat it. I moved out that night. My parents helped me pack, while David sat on the living room couch, head in his hands, watching his life dismantle itself. In the months that followed, the divorce proceedings were swift. The evidence of his financial and emotional fraud was overwhelming. The judge was not sympathetic. I was awarded the house, a significant portion of our assets, and full custody. Though David has visitation rights, he has yet to exercise. David is currently living in a studio apartment. His reputation in our social circle is completely incinerated. No one wants to associate with a man capable of such profound deception. His own parents have barely spoken to him. Disgusted by the way he treated me and their future grandchild, he lost his wife, his home, and his perfect child-free life because he wasn't man enough to be honest about what he wanted. He thought he was playing a long game, but he was just setting the stage for his own ruin. I'm 4 months along now. It's a boy. Every time he kicks, I'm reminded that the truth doesn't just set you free, it delivers. Am I the asshole for exposing his medical secret to the whole family? Maybe. But he spent 5 years watching me mourn a child that he had killed before we even met. I'd say we're even. The architecture of his betrayal collapsed on top of him, and I walked out of the rubble with the only thing that ever mattered, the future. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the story, click like and subscribe. Leave us a comment to tell us what you would have done in this situation.